how long of a delay in prosecution is so long that it establishes a violation of a constitutional right to a speedy trial? To find out, you have to read People versus Johnson. It's only 8 pages. Don't have time for that? I got you covered. This is TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, New York Court of Appeals episode on People versus Johnson. This can be found at 2022 New York Slip Opinion 06537, published by the Court of Appeals on November 17th, 2022. The issue in this case is what factors the court must consider when assessing a claim for constitutional deprivation of speedy trial. There are two kinds of speedy trial rights. There's statutory speedy trial rights, which you can find at Criminal Procedure Law 3030. And then there's constitutional rights for speedy trial, which you can find in the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution, incorporated by the 14th Amendment. Also, there's civil rights law, Section 12, which discusses the right to a speedy trial in all cases. The Court of Appeals assessed here a difficult situation where there was a 14-year-old girl who had been given alcohol by a 15-year-old boy, and she woke up in the middle of the street, had apparently been the victim of a sexual assault by the 15-year-old boy. But she had no memory of the event. She didn't know the person's name. She was a no-hit on a photo array. So it took a long time to investigate this case fully, to get DNA from the SANE exam completed, processed, uploaded into the CODIS system for analysis and comparison. Ultimately, they found out that it was the defendant based upon the CODIS information. And there's a lot of investigative work. One of the police officers investigating died. The mother of the victim wouldn't really pass the message along to the victim at some point. Through a whole series of investigation, it took almost 8 years between the crime and the indictment for the crime of the defendant. And the appellate division reviewed that a motion after the defendant takes a plea. Well, the defendant tried to move to dismiss. The trial court denied it. The defendant ultimately took a plea on one count of rape in the second degree, which is based upon age. And then, in a post-judgment motion, moved to dismiss based upon the speedy trial issues. Goes to the appellate division, goes to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, the appellate division denies it, analyzing the 5 factors of the test I'm about to describe. And the Court of Appeals gets that appeal and says the appellate division didn't do the right analysis. They explained that there's 5 factors, and these 5 factors were discussed in the 1975 Court of Appeals case of People versus Taranovich. The 5 factors are: number 1, the extent of delay; number 2, the reason for the delay; number 3, the nature of the underlying charge; number 4, whether or not there was an extended period of pre-trial incarceration here; and number 5, whether there's an indication that the delay resulted in impairment to the defendant's position here, or prejudice to the defendant. So, and they also emphasize that it's a holistic test. This is sort of a look at everything, look at all the factors collectively and in the aggregate, and then decide what you think. There's no single factor that's more important or determinative rather than any other factor in that list. And the Court of Appeals explains that the appellate division deviated from that test in certain ways. With respect to number 1, the time delay, here there was almost 8 years. They make clear that the more time delay, the greater the likelihood that there's harm to the defendant, but there's no hard and fast number. There's no number at which it's definitely automatically too prejudicial to the defendant. Number 2, with respect to the reasons for the delay, they say the appellate division should have spent more time on this and examined the people's good faith reasons for the delay of the period of time between the crime and the indictment here. Number 3, with regard to the nature of the crime, they say, the Court of Appeals says, it's the nature of the crime both with respect to the severity and the complexity in terms of how to investigate the crime and gather evidence here. Here it's very serious crime, obviously, but also there's a lot of evidentiary issues given the 14-year-old victim's memory issues, the DNA issues. With respect to number 4, The question is there an extended pretrial incarceration? Here, the defendant was not held pretrial. Defendant was not indicted until they was not held in, was not incarcerated in this case until he was indicted for it. Number 5, there was no. The question is there an indication of prejudice resulting from the delay? And here they say the appellate division misapplied it. They applied it only with respect to the conviction, to the charge of conviction, which is rape 2, and didn't think about all the other charges that were facing the defendant when he pled guilty to that rape 2. They say that basically you have to look at the charges facing the defendant and see if any one of those charges have impaired the defendant based upon the delayed time of prosecution. If you like what you just saw and you want more of it, please hit like or subscribe to let me know.